Nathalie Simper, and this is The Limitless Musician, a podcast by KE Creative. Our team helps modern musicians find modern solutions to building a sustainable music career. Along with my co-host, Dr. Katherine IG, we will help you learn what it takes to build a career that enhances your life instead of restricting it by becoming the limitless musician you are meant to be. Hey, Limitless Musician here. Welcome back to the podcast. Thanks for tuning in wherever you are, especially if you are wrapping up your end of the school year madness, probably preparing for jury season and for any last minute exams for those academic courses. I know my private students are middle school and high school, but they are so stressed with all of the tests and final exams and state testing and all of that good stuff. So if you are tuning in to kind of give yourself a break from the mayhem and all of the hectic stuff going on in your life, then I hope that for this episode, at least, you can kick your feet up and relax, or maybe knock out some of those little tasks that you need to take care of while you listen. Here in K Creative Land, we are gearing up for another enrollment period for the Music Teacher's Playbook, which is the flagship course of KE Creative. And if you don't know what that is literally the reason that I am sitting here doing this podcast today. When I was just recently married and everybody was trying to figure out what to do with a global pandemic back in March of 2020, I saw this ad for the Music Teacher's Playbook. And at the time, finances were not really, were available to be able to invest some money into a course like this. I saw that it was necessary because I had so many questions about how to develop my private music studio, how to learn all the businessy stuff, like how to file taxes, how to do bookkeeping, and all the stuff that you just never think about when you're in music school and do have the resources to learn those things. But I took the leap anyway and decided to take the course. And through the course, I was able to meet the amazing Katherine IG and to be able to work and learn from her, to be able to feel confident as not only a private music studio owner, but as a musician and as a human being. And that decision really changed the trajectory of my own music career, because now, several years later, I get to work with Katherine all the time, every day. And I get to work with a lot of other awesome musicians just like you who are just wanting to make a living and to find a way to make your career financially stable and sustainable in the long term. So if you are a private music studio teacher and you have some gaps in knowledge that you're worried about, or maybe you feel like, this is something that you need to do in order to further your education and really grow your confidence as a career musician, then please check out the link for the Music Teacher's Playbook in the description. Or if you're just curious and you want to chat, go ahead and hit me up or Katherine on Instagram. Katherine is at katherineemeneth, and I am at the Limitless Musician. And both of those links will be in the show notes description. For this final episode of the first season of the Limitless Musician podcast, I just want to say thank you so much for all of your support and for everything that you've shared in order to help make this podcast a useful resource and a way to bring others into a safe, encouraging, and uplifting community. With all of the feelings and emotions, concerns, frustrations, anger, burnout, you name it. It's great to be able to have a community where people can come together and not only express what is going on in their lives, but also to understand that, you're not alone in feeling the way that you feel about your career. Your career, just like anyone else's career, is going to have its fair share of ups and downs. And you, as a human being, will have your own ups and downs that may affect or influence the course of your music career. So I hope that this podcast has been able to provide you some insight, encouragement, and some motivation to be able to take small steps to build the career that you are wanting to have. So for our final episode of the season, and we may drop a couple of extra bonuses or goodies, but for our final episode, I'm going to talk about the fact that limits do exist in your classical music career and in life in general. And that's not actually the worst thing in the world. When you think about limits, it's obviously, natural to think of the limitations, the restrictions, the boundaries that contain things. But as humans, we are made to make mistakes. We are flawed. And the beautiful thing is that everybody has their own unique sets of strengths, of weaknesses, of insights, of things that they are excited about, of things that make them special, so that they can contribute a unique voice into the classical music industry. If we were all made the same, it would be so great. But even then, we would have our own limits, because the limits would be determined for us. And in the classical music industry, there are a lot of limits that are determined for us. However, you have the power and you have the ability to make choices that will either align with those limits and allow you to stay contained and feel unsatisfied or unfulfilled in your career, or you can choose to identify what those limits are and work through them, move forward in spite of them, so that you can have a career that is unique to you and something that complements your lifestyle and enhances your life, so that you have the energy, you have the ability, and you have the desire to do the things that you love, to be with the people that you enjoy, and to pursue other interests that you have outside of being a classical musician. So we're going to talk about what some of those limits are, how they contribute to burnout, imposter syndrome, and the idea that money as a musician will always be scarce. So let's talk about the first time that you were ever told, maybe not in words, maybe not in actions, but that there is only one right way to succeed as a musician. And we're very aware that there is a traditional path of being a classical musician that is often expected for us to follow. Now, it may not be said in so many words, you have to do this career or else you are not a real musician. And sometimes it is explicitly said, but more often the doubt and the reservations and the negativity that comes from feeling that way, it stems from one incident or maybe a few small incidents over the course of your life. And your mind takes that and creates the pressure and the standard and the expectation and sets that in the front of your mind all the time. I can remember thinking back to the first time I expressed to a teacher that I wanted to be a professional musician. I was in middle school and I was just, doe-eyed, bright-eyed, so in love with music, because as an introvert, this was the only way that I really felt that I had a unique voice and that I felt heard and that I could connect with other people. However, when I expressed that feeling of I want to be a classical musician, I want to perform and I want to have fun with music, my teacher, not in so many words, was like, okay, well, you better have another job lined up. And as a middle schooler, that didn't really sit with me at the time, didn't really sink in. But as I went into high school and started talking more about my desire to pursue music in college, and as I went to college and expressed my desire to go to grad school or to, have a career beyond my degree program, the sentiment is that you either have to be an orchestral musician or you have to be a college professor. And if you wanted to do any other career or any other job outside of those two jobs, then you weren't really a classical musician. You were just doing it because it was a passion project or because it was a hobby, or you did it knowing that it wasn't going to really build a career that could sustain you financially and to help you feel fulfilled as a human being. That is a limit that many musicians experience and take as truth. That if you are not an orchestral musician or an international soloist or a college professor at a prestigious institution, then you're not really spending your time wisely as a classical musician. But think of all of the other jobs that fall into the music industry, and not just classical music. There's music everywhere. You go into a bookstore, you go into the grocery store, anywhere you go in public, there's almost always music playing. You turn on your car and the radio turns on, or your Bluetooth connects to your Spotify. There's music everywhere. There are composers, there are recording artists, there are audio engineers, there are people who work in administration to facilitate the organization of professional orchestras and professional ensembles. The list can go on, and especially in this day and age, with social media and digital courses, the possibilities are endless for the kinds of jobs and the kinds of skills that you can employ in a classical music career. So if there's one view that says you only have two options or you're not a real musician, and then there's the other side of that where there's almost an infinite number of other jobs that you could pursue as a classical musician, then why is it that more musicians often than not buy into that narrow-minded two-option career mindset? Now, let me tell you, I definitely believed that two job mindset for the longest time. It was my dream to be a classical musician in an orchestra, being able to perform all these incredible symphonies and to be able to connect with audiences and the people on stage. And it was my dream to teach at a university to help mold the minds of future generations of musicians. And throughout my career, I've done those things. I've been able to perform in an orchestra. I've been able to teach at a higher education institution. And they did bring a lot of satisfaction and fulfillment for the experiences I was able to have in those periods of my career. But those were not my only passions as a human being. I love to have time to bake, to cuddle with my dogs who are completely absent from the studio today, and to spend time traveling. And unfortunately, pursuing that two-road mindset of you're an orchestral musician or a college professor, or in many cases, you're both, and then that's it. I could not provide for myself. And then when I got married, I couldn't provide for my family just on those two jobs alone. I was able to find a way to incorporate my passions of organization and efficiency to be able to build up my own private studio, to be able to create my own job opportunities, or to seek out opportunities that were in alignment with the kind of life that I wanted to live, so that I could have time to bake, to be with my dogs, to be with my family, to travel, and to live a life outside of my career. So you're probably thinking, yeah, that sounds really great. I want to do those things, but sometimes it's not practical, right? And I totally understand that. But it's also impractical to think that, if you're presented with the mindset that, okay, I can only do these things and that's going to lead to my success, versus there are all these other ways that other people have found success and fulfillment and satisfaction in their careers. And it doesn't look like the traditional career path, but it works. So, what is the likelihood that that is false? And it seems so simple on paper to say, well, obviously, it's more likely that you can pursue another job in other than being a professional orchestral musician or being a college professor and find success and happiness. But that route, believing that there are infinite number of possibilities, creates their own kinds of limits. It's called decision paralysis, where you have so many options that you have no idea where to start. You know that the potential to have a career that brings you satisfaction, that enhances your life, that allows you to have healthy and normal boundaries between your work and your personal life, you know that that's possible. But the scariest part is leaving the structure that has already been created. The classical music bubble, the industry, the part of the industry that says, this is how you do it or else, or this is just how it's done because that's the way it's always been, wants you to believe that this is the only structure that's possible. It's easy to stay in that structure because even though it brings burnout, even though it breeds your self-doubt and perhaps often resentment or bitterness for working so hard and feeling like you have little to show for it, it's easy to stay in that structure because you didn't have to build that structure. You didn't have to make mistakes in order to figure out what was going to work within that structure and how to build a new one, how to improve on it. So most of the limits that are in existence in our little classical music bubble, it's not that they are permanent. It's not that they are insurmountable, but it's that we have convinced ourselves that, well, that's just the way it is. And I'm not really 100% sure what's on the other side of the fence, the side of the fence that has an infinite number of possibilities of jobs, of skills, of passions that I could put together in a way that works for me. It's easier to deal with the things that you know, even if they are things that are holding you back, even if there are things that are restricting the financial growth, the career growth and the personal growth that you can experience. And I'm not telling you, oh, well, if you just set your mind to it, to just do it, to just step outside of your comfort zone and then just go and make those mistakes and figure it out for yourself. I'm not saying that if you just do it, if you just set your mind to it, then it'll be fine. It'll be great. Veering from the path that is most walked, the worn down path, is scary. It's difficult. It's frustrating. And yes, it's rewarding, but it's a high risk move. As I mentioned earlier, you can stay in the structure of I'm going to do things the way they've always been. And if they don't work, I'm just going to keep on trying and keep on trying the same things over and over again. But you don't have to. Fear is going to happen. Failure is going to happen. And it can be easy to say, well, I have tried. I have done the scary things. I have put myself out of my comfort zone. And I just keep hitting wall after wall after wall. So it must be me. I must be doing something wrong. I must not be trying hard enough, or I must not have what it takes to have that dream career, that career that fits into my life, instead of me trying to cram myself into the box to fit into my career. But the reality is that there isn't anything wrong with you. There are different approaches to take. You can make mistakes and learn from them. You can seek out help through resources, either free resources or paid resources. Seek out a mentor, because your growth as a person doesn't end when you have that music degree in your hand. So it's natural to believe that your growth as a career musician and your career can grow beyond the skills and the experiences that you gained in your music school program. The musicians that find a rhythm, that find a routine that works for them, where they're able to pay their living expenses and to enjoy things outside of their careers, they're the ones who are persistent, who really are open to learning at any point in their life, not just when they've set their mind to it. Anything can be a learning opportunity in your life. And you never know what kind of opportunities or people or connections are going to come up that will spark your creative juices to be thinking, maybe there's a different way that I can be doing things. Maybe instead of just taking audition after audition after audition and getting the same result, maybe I can find a way to create my own performing experiences so that I'm not dependent on whether or not I land this orchestral job, or I get on the sub list, or I'm referred for this local gig. If you want to be a teacher and you keep having those job interviews, but are never able to land that job at that higher learning institution, then create your own studio, make your own rules, find your own students, and find a way to embed yourself in the community so that you can do the things that excite you. If you want to be a content creator, right? The possibilities are there. And it's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be convenient. And it may not happen overnight. It definitely won't happen overnight, let me tell you that. But with consistency, just like with practicing your instrument, with consistency comes exponential growth. So If you're sitting here thinking, okay, all right, Nathalie, like I see it. I see it. There are some ways that I kind of hold myself back, or I'm kind of keeping myself stuck, but I haven't wanted to admit it because I can't go outside the box. I can't say no to these gigs that are really just weighing me down. I'm not qualified enough to do my own recital series, and I'm scared to charge what I believe I'm worth and what my services are worth based on my expertise and my skills and experiences. It's totally okay to think those things. And those are things that I have thought and sometimes continue to think that, you question what you're worth, you question the value that you bring to the table, and question whether what you have right now at this point in time is enough to be able to help you move toward the career that you want. But it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to have those thoughts. And it's okay to embrace the fact that you're having those thoughts. Because if you can identify the limits that totally exist, then you can begin to challenge it. You can begin to feel empowered. You can begin to work towards that clarity, the confidence, and the discernment to be able to see the possibilities for opportunities around you. When you name the limit that is in your life, that has put a barrier in your career or in your personal development, you can begin to realize that it's not about you. It's not your shortcomings. It's not your flaws or your weaknesses or your mistakes that are creating that limit. The limit is there because that is how things have been. So if that is how things have been, you can make a different choice that can change what has been into something that will be. So we're going to talk about how to take that awareness, that acknowledgement of those limits that are real and present in your mindset for yourself and your career. Then you can start to think of actionable steps to start breaking those barriers down. You can get curious. You can start reflecting. Where did this belief come from? Why am I so convinced that this is truth? This is my reality. And who benefits if I believe that this is my truth? Who benefits if you believe that you are going to be struggling in your career your entire life and that that's just how it's going to be? Then start looking outward. Seek other musicians that you admire or you notice are doing things differently. Maybe they're running a full-time studio and that's something that you have always wanted to do. Maybe a musician you admire is creating a lot of social media content, and that's something that you have a passion for, but you're not sure how to approach that yet. Maybe you see a composer and you've been composing yourself, but worried about putting yourself out there, or wondering how to price yourself or how to put your music out there. Find musicians who are already living the way that you want to live, that have the career that you want to have, especially when they fall out of that traditional path of being an orchestral musician or being a college professor. Don't get me wrong. If those are your dreams, if those are your passions to be one or both of those careers, then absolutely go for it. Find those people. But if you find yourself falling outside of the scope of those two jobs, then be encouraged that the majority of musicians fall outside of that scope as well. Next, think about your own definition of success. Is it a definition that you wholeheartedly believe in, or is it a definition that has been influenced from outside opinions and experiences that have put you down? Success is what you define it to be, not what others define it to be for you, your career, and your life. And next, change is one of those things that is inevitable. However, change does not happen overnight. Pushing down those barriers, breaking down those limits for yourself doesn't mean taking a huge step in and transforming everything that you've ever done and known. It starts with small and simple steps to step outside of your comfort zone, do something you've never done before or that you've been afraid to do, and start expanding that comfort zone so that in a month, a year, a decade, you can look back and say, wow, I remember when I was so afraid to send that email. But now, if I were to send that email today, I wouldn't even think about it. Now, I use an email as an example because I actually am fortunate enough to be able to do this podcast thanks to one little email that I sent that I was so terrified to send. I literally was sitting at my computer, like typing it out. It was riddled with so many I'm sorries for taking up your time. I'm sorry for this. I'm sorry for that. And I read through it. I removed all of the I'm sorries and I'm sure you're not looking for this and sorry to bother you and all of that extra stuff that was just my inner doubts and worries and dialogue. And the entire time my finger went down to hit the enter key on the keyboard, I was like audibly like screaming. I was just like, because I was so terrified to send that email. If you have had that feeling before, please let me know. But from that email came an opportunity to join KE Creative, came an opportunity to work with so many wonderful and fantastic musicians who have a common goal of just wanting to connect with people and to contribute to their community and to do it in a way that helps them do what they're passionate about and what they love. So think about the small, simple things that you can do to be able to take steps in the direction of your dream career. It could be getting yourself into a regular routine. It could be setting aside time each week or each month to brainstorm or to do one thing that you've always wanted to do but have been afraid to do it or have found a reason to postpone. And while nobody benefits from you believing that things are always just going to be the same and that there's no way that things can change into the better, so many people are going to benefit from you taking steps to empowering yourself to live the life that you want, not the life that you feel you have to conform to or to settle for. Remember that you are a human being, first and foremost. You are a musician second. Your requirements for being successful can be what you determine them to be. It doesn't have to be burnout, criticism, negativity, scarcity. It could be something sustainable. It can be something exciting and motivating. And it can help you embrace that limitless musicianeer inside of you who will engineer and create their own career. So if you're going to take anything away from this, acknowledge that yes, the limit does exist. And that's not the end of the world. It's actually a wonderful thing to know exactly what limits you ascribe to so that you can start unlearning those limits and start learning a new way of moving forward and making your career blossom. Thanks so much for tuning in. And if you have any thoughts that you want to share, any feedback about episode topics that you either want us to dive a little bit deeper into, or that you haven't heard yet and you really want to hear, please send me an email or subscribe to the newsletter, the LM newsletter, or send me a DM on Instagram so that we can connect and so that I can make sure that this podcast continues to be something that is helpful and supportive to you wherever you are in your music career. That's all for today's episode on The Limitless Musician. If you liked this episode, follow us on Instagram at The Limitless Musician to tell us what you want to hear next. Remember to subscribe to our newsletter to get exclusive content that won't show up anywhere else by clicking the link in the show notes. Until next time.